Mental health oppression is the systematic suppression of discharge and the invalidation of people's minds. The point of mental health oppression seems to be to oppress mental patients. However, it is actually to maintain the status quo by reinforcing and obscuring the functioning of other oppressions and enforcing conformity. Many cultures have viewed mental illness as a form of religious punishment or demonic possession. In the 5th century BC, people began treating mentally ill people with techniques not rooted in religion or superstition for the first time. It was not until the 18th century that there was a movement to include kindness in the treatment of mental health patients. In attempting to research the history of mental health on campus or the campus's stance on mental illness, we were met with the following page.
Today we will be discussing mental health at Santa Clara University, the state of it, ways to help it, and thoughtful solutions trying to improve it. Throughout this video, a presentation will be made of those who tell their stories, peer health educators, and students from around campus.
Ditch Shanks. She is a marriage and family therapist who specializes or has an area of focus with adults and teens that have experienced trauma and symptoms of trauma. So about a month ago-ish, I had a situation where I was in crisis. When I say crisis, I think that kind of suggests that maybe I was like having like suicidal like thoughts or anything. I was not, but I also was super triggered. It was right after the Las Vegas shooting. I had remembered from past trauma that I was also a victim of gun violence in kind of a weird passive way, but I hadn't made that connection before. And I was also dealing with some other like past, childhood things that had come into like the forefront of like my consciousness, I would say, over the summer. So there were kind of a lot of things in terms of like dealing into child studies that brought a lot of those feelings into the forefront of my consciousness. So when the Las Vegas shooting happened and my friend was recounting her story of being there and talking about someone seeing the violence that she witnessed, it just brought everything right back to me. And I was literally, it was all I could do to just get through school that day. And when I got home, I cried all the way home. I went over to her house because I saw, she lives right next door to me, so her car was in the driveway. Thank God. So I went over there, knocked on her door. I'm like, I need 5 minutes. And I showed up and was kind of a basket case. So how to deal with it before. Like I didn't know who to call, who to talk to. I didn't want to talk to 50 people. There is shame attached to it, like just, So I think that kind of brings us to our other point of like, when you're in crisis or when you're like needing help, how do we make sure that we know where those resources are? Like what are some of those like things that we can do? Because as a university, like that's kind of their job to make sure that we know what resources are available.
You have the resources and you know they're available.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are the resources. It sounds like the campus has resources. So people just need to know that they're available and maybe extend those resources so you've got the mental health services there on campus. But in addition to that, there might be educational services like workshops or classes on different aspects of mental health, self-care, understanding of what to look for in depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, panic attack, and then how to help yourself through that or where to get support for that.
Yeah. It's I know that it's really not something that you can necessarily measure how effective something is or is not, because you only kind of are going off of, we found out this during this process that there have been 3 completed suicides in the 2017 of SCU students. And that was shocking for us. We had no idea. So there's no real measure to say, well, if we didn't have these services, there would have been 20 or something. You don't really know how to measure. It's like putting in gun laws, right? How do we know if we stopped something if it never happened?
Right.
You know, so it is something that is really hard to measure, but it's just making sure that we have the resources that are kind of so available. Like, we all are taught to call 911 if there's an emergency. But when you're having like a mental health crisis or needing help before it becomes a crisis, we don't have those sorts of resources that are ingrained in us, like how do we talk about it, who do we talk about it to, and who do we call. So, which actually leads us to, there's a 3-digit number, the 211. And it kind of will tell us, like, depending on our need, it'll give us the resources available to us.
Yeah, all kinds of resources.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's in, I think it said 170 different languages, which, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you don't even have, I mean, in your primary language you could get help without having to like work very hard.
Right.
So that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
The other thing that we were discussing too was just things that you see, like, you know, once you become a parent, how many times do you have like poison control like posted, like where all your medicine is, like everywhere. Like, you always know where to get that number for poison control in case your kid, like, you know, drinks a bottle of Tylenol or whatever, right? So I think we just need to have those sorts of numbers and resources available kind of everywhere, where it just becomes like thoughtless, like, oh, I'm having like, you know, I'm feeling so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get past it. I don't know, you know, those sorts of things are really good resources just to be able to call. Or if your roommate, for example, are having like, you know, sleeping and not going to class or whatever, like, where can you help her? Like, tell her to go to get help, or you get help for yourself to help her if she's not, or he's not wanting to get help himself. So.
We asked current students to see if they knew about any of the available mental health resources on campus. Here are some of their answers.
On campus, I know of the Cowell Center, and you can make on campus. I know of the Cowell Center, and you can make appointments with like a psychologist there. And then at the Office of Student Life, they have like a crisis thing you can go to.
Campus. There's campus safety, right? Or in the Cowell Center, and I think that's on the Wellness Center. Is that the same thing? Yeah.
No. Yeah, so the mental health resources available to students on this campus that are part of like kind of the institution are CAPS, which is a part of Cowell, and they have like CAPS appointments as well as 10 free therapy sessions offered to every single student, and they also have resources to refer you to psychologists or therapists outside of Santa Clara if basically your needs require those. In addition to that, we have the Wellness Center run by a woman named Lisa, and she can kind of help more with, I guess, kind of larger like issues someone might be having on campus, like with kind of like abuse or like things that kind of are less specific to mental health, and yeah.
Not yet. I haven't.
Yeah, last year I went to CAPS and used a lot of the therapy sessions and then got referred outside.
Nope.
Yeah, quite a few of my friends have. I referred a few, and I think definitely more need to be using them.
Oh, I'm sure it's pretty stressful, especially when people come all the way from home. It can be quite the adjustment.
I think it's like hard, the transition, and it could like affect like homesickness, or like just a new environment makes you question things and friends, and like, yeah.
I think it can be really stressful for a student to like learn to live on their own and be independent, and sometimes that can add more stress than a school load would have.
I think it's incredibly difficult because no matter what people tell you about how difficult it is, you don't know until you're there, and every single thing in your life is kind of changing all at once. And even if you've got like a mental health condition that you've been dealing with for years, the loneliness and the different eating and the stress and everything just culminates, and I think everyone struggles with that a lot, but like freshmen also like feel really alone because they don't really have that support system.
Yeah, they made us do the online course, which was like beneficial, but then they also have a lot of resources that they don't force you to take necessarily, but they are there if you want. Like they had the National Mental Health Summit yesterday. That had plenty of resources for all kinds of students with different needs.
Yeah, I think they have. They've had like the whole Bronco series, which really like touched on a lot of the sensitive but like crucial like aspects about mental health.
Not necessarily. I mean, I feel like we touched upon it in orientation, but like in certain cases, like what the exact like organizations, but like places that help with mental illness haven't been that fully developed.
Not really. I think that all of the education that I have about mental health has come from me going through it personally and needing to like navigate those resources and by myself while I was here. I think if I didn't experience them myself, that I wouldn't know as much as I should.
I don't think there is actually. I feel like they're very open about it. With all the resources and people talking about it, doesn't seem like something that's like hidden or like forbidden.
Yeah, I do. I think that oftentimes people like think negatively about mental illness and stuff like that, and they don't always want to talk about it, even though it's a very relevant issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think people are working to kind of make it go away, but I still think that there's a big lack of understanding between people who don't have mental health issues and people who do. I think that people who do not really struggle with mental health can do a lot by kind of asking questions and trying to self-educate. And then people who do maybe have struggled with mental health issues, who feel comfortable and obviously safe and confident talking about them, if they kind of open up themselves and their stories to more of the public and to their friends and families, I don't know, I think that would go a long way.
I don't think there's a need for improvement. I feel like the things that they've offered is very like open, and like it's not, they talk about confidentiality and all that, so I think it's all good.
I would say just get maybe more counselors, because I know that I've talked to a couple people and they don't necessarily feel like there are enough resources, not resources, but like people to help them in the resources. So maybe just like getting more faculty and then also bringing more awareness.
Basically, once you call CAPS, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get your appointment, which is a really, really long time. And once people are already kind of struggling with something that gets so overwhelming they reach out for help, 2 to 3 weeks seems like way too long. And only 10% of the people that call CAPS like to make an appointment actually end up making an appointment and going, which I think is a huge problem. So I know Pure Health Educators, which are part of the Wellness Center, are trying to kind of make a kind of like a support group or office hours where you can go and talk about issues you may be experiencing while you're waiting for more professional help. So I think that would be a really, really good step, to have a kind of intermediary space where people can go and feel heard and kind of have maybe some meet some new people who are maybe also experiencing the same issues.
Mental health services on college campuses have always been important. However, we are seeing an increase in demand that is outpacing the university's ability to keep up. Santa Clara University has supported the student body by introducing the Mental Health Summit and fostering student-run programs such as peer health educators, but it is paramount that the university continues to address this issue to adequately meet the needs of its student body.